But some will say the judiciary hasn't really stood up on its feet. Looked as if the judiciary had been crawling all this while.
Well, the question I will ask is in which area? First, in the area of democracy in this country, I think the judiciary has stood its ground to stabilize the system very substantially. But in the area of curbing corruption, I must admit that the judiciary has not lived up to expectation. Not because of the individuals who are the judges in this courts, but because of the state of the law. I will give you a practical example from my experience. Sometimes in 2008, we had a new governor in the central bank, now the Emir of Kano. And he carried out some reforms that threw up some chief executives, for arraignment before the courts. Some of them were arraigned in different courts. And between 2008 and 2015 is about 8 years. Apart from one of the chief executives who accepted the plea bargaining and was convicted, I can't remember now, was it for 2 months or 3 or 6 months? No other person has been convicted. We keep entering and coming out the courts. Motions are being filed. Judges are listening to the motions. They are making rulings and what have you. Only at the end of the day, somehow, somewhere, for one technical point, to set free some of these people. And what is the technical point? Oh, this court has jurisdiction, this court does not have jurisdiction. So the law has to look at that and look at the constitution of the country, whatever loopholes that exist in expeditious trial of these cases, they should be plugged. If we need to amend the constitution to widen the jurisdiction of the state high courts and the federal high courts, we must do so. And stop the compartmental dichotomy between the jurisdiction of the federal high court, the jurisdiction of the state high court. The whole essence of justice is to find out what the truth is. Is it true that this man has stolen? If he has stolen, let him go and face the punishment. All right? So, and the president also talked about that when he was talking about the judiciary, that there's a need for a fast and speedy dispensation of justice, particularly in corruption cases.
Correct.
So we hope that it will look at the laws, the FCC Establishment Act, the ICPC, the Criminal Code of the Federation, and particularly the provisions dealing with the powers, the functions, and the jurisdictions of our courts. Harmonize them, widen their powers and jurisdictions, so that whether you go to state high court or to federal high court, the court is going to inquire. And that is the state of justice administration all over the world today. It's like an inquiry. What have you done? Is it true you have done this? If yes, you go for what the law provides. Now, that also will rub on the attitude of the legal practitioners. Today, you can hardly blame a lawyer that files one preliminary objection or the other to challenge the arraignment of his client because the law provides that he has to do that. But some of these things must have to stop. Secondly, the idea of fighting an interlocutory decision from the High Court to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court, we also have to look at that. There is no reason why interlocutory appeals arising from interlocutory decisions cannot be terminated at the Court of Appeal. Not only that, it can be taken further, that whatever interlocutory appeal you have should await the final determination of the case, so that you don't hang the substance of the case and be pursuing shadow up to the highest court of the land. These are the reforms some of us will be looking at.
Well, Mr. Additional, let me quickly take you back to looking at maintaining law and order in the society. We've had several cases where punishment for crimes that are looked at as petty are usually heavier than punishment meted out for crimes that are much, much heavier. For instance, there have been cases of people being arrested and taken to court over petty crimes like stealing somebody's animal, like handset. A goat or a handset. And then they've been given crimes ranging from 2 to 3 years in
some
prison.
Even
and
sentenced
some even
to death. A recent one.
Some were even fined very heavily. Now, for somebody who, committed a crime like stealing government funds, for instance, the person just got a slap on the wrist and not even 1 day in jail. how do you begin to tie that in to what the president wants to achieve with regards ridding the system of, one, corruption, not just in the public sector, but most especially in the judiciary?
Your question is very pertinent. In a democracy, whatever reform Mr. President intends must be achieved within the context of legality, the context of law, the context of constitution. So, I stand to be corrected. I think it's fairly long time we have a holistic reform of our laws. There's a need for a holistic reform. That's why I talked about the criminal code the other time. The criminal code provides for all manner of offenses and the sanctions. The judges cannot go outside those provisions. They just cannot. You cannot sit down there as a judge and say, I have a strong feeling that this fellow should go for 10 years. Even when the law provides for 2, he cannot do that. But we need to look at the laws and enhance them. The function of sanctions is to deter. So where the punishment is inadequate, that function will not, that objective will not be achieved. So I quite agree with you. But the solution does not lie in the arbitrary imposition of punishment by the judges, but in reforming the laws. And I hope that Mr. President will direct the appropriate ministry, as a matter of urgency. We have a law reform commission. We have the Ministry of Justice. And direct them to embark on a holistic reform of our laws. Once this is achieved, we'll be getting towards your position.
So we're talking about policies. We're talking about reforming the policies that we already have on ground. But looking at where Nigeria now as an entity, the corporation called Nigeria is, what areas need that immediate reform? For instance, because I know that the president is very passionate about ridding the country about corruption, it's going to start from that key sector, the judiciary, the Economic Financial Crimes Commission, the ICPC, and the rest of it. But what other aspects of the economy need to have a quick heart set? Let me use that language, a quick heart set, so that this new government hits the ground, not only running, but at least it's running with ammunition.
Thank you. I've talked about the law. I won't have to repeat that. Now, my friend talked about attitude. I will tie that with maintenance of law and order. The police force, who has the primary responsibility of maintaining laws, must also engage in real reform of the police institution. Today, you find some of our policemen hiding somewhere, waiting for you to commit an offense and then pound on you. And as soon as they do that, not necessarily to take you to answer to the offense you have committed, is to settle. So the new government must look at the police institution. When I say looking at it, it includes their remuneration. Because if a man's work does not guarantee a living wages, you cannot get the best out. It will cut corners. I've stopped on several occasions and called policemen and interviewed, discussed with them. Why is everybody talking about corruption at checking points? And you guys continue to do this thing. And he said, my brother, who are you? I said, I'm a lawyer. We are both involved in the maintenance of law and all that. He said, look, as a lawyer, I want to believe you'll be aware that some of the police stations will buy the statement papers. Some of them, when we lose any of our members, we carry them to their villages to bury. Some of us, we buy our shoes from these monies. You call it corruption, I call it internally generated revenue. So it may be funny, but you must look at the system. Provide funds. Make their stay, satisfactory to them. Sometimes ago, it took somebody inspecting the police headquarters in Ikeja to see the ways of life of policemen living in the barracks there. They are human beings. You expect the best as the police in the UK, as the police in the US, but are you doing what the government is doing for the police in UK and in the US to our own policemen in Nigeria? So we have to look at the police.